I'm going to be straightforward and say that Season 11 was all over the place. Some of the episodes this season range from really fantastic to really terrible. Not only was this the last season to air in its entirety before Hillenburg's passing, but I'm pretty sure this was the point in the show where they started to appeal more to veteran fans. Not only referencing past episodes, but also retreading and following up on past concepts in the previous seasons. Now, I feel like referencing your past work can be a bit of a dual-edged sword. It could be done really sparingly or respectfully and serve as a bit of a love letter, be it towards fans that kept the legacy alive all these years, or to the people that worked hard on that past work. But when given to the wrong hands, it could be the equivalent of jangling keys in a baby's face. Like, hey guys, do you remember this? Or this? What about this? Do you remember this? Don't pay attention to anything else that's happening, just let us feed into your nostalgia. It could come across as manipulative and desperate, and it could really distract your audience, be it newcomers or veterans. Now, there are some exceptions for me personally, like the Super Mario Bros. Movie is the first thing that comes into my head, and I'm one of the few people that actually didn't mind Wish. And I feel like Season 11 of SpongeBob SquarePants handles it just okay. There are a few episodes based off of old gags or concepts that were done during the heyday of the show, and there are some I consider to be more successors and retreads. As for when they call back on previous episodes for a joke, however, well, let's just say I hope you like the theme song.
Who lifted a pineapple under the sea?
I don't know, a wizard?
But enough of that stuff. Let's get into the main topic of this video, the top 5 best and worst episodes of Season 11. As with the previous list, these are all subjective opinions, and you may disagree with me on some of them. And I'd be curious to see your opinions in the comment section below. But enough stalling at this point, let's just get the worst list over and done with. Oh boy. Pat Nokia. After another failed attempt to steal the Krabby Patty formula, Plankton comes up with the idea to impose this Patrick's conscience, in order for him to get Patrick to give him a Krabby Patty. And that's really all this episode is. I'll be honest, I really don't have much to say about it. It's just a by-the-numbers parody of the classic fairy tale, and I just felt nothing watching it. I thought Plankton's plan was kind of dumb. I'm usually fond of some of Plankton's plans, but that's because most of them feel well thought out. But here he just felt like he pulled it out of his ass. Now, yes, there were some plans that he thought out on the fly, but at least some of those plans, like the lawsuit, made sense. Here, SpongeBob just tells Patrick about conscience, and Plankton all of a sudden gets this idea to pretend to be it. Also, the whale segment. Enough said. I do appreciate the return of Goofy Goober's party boat. It's a shame it had to return in a boring and uninspired episode.
Number 1. High five, everyone! Huh. Don't put me down first! High five! High five! High five! High five! High five!
Goons on the Moon. In this half-hour special, Sandy, SpongeBob, Pearl, and Squidina, oh god, are preparing to go on a trip to the moon. Squidward also accidentally gets caught up in the mix trying to deliver a Krabby Patty, and while he's looking for his destination of delivery, he ends up getting lost. Back with the group, as they experiment with a few things, SpongeBob accidentally launches the rocket and pulls the moon out of orbit, not only affecting the water levels on Earth, but also depleting almost their entire fuel tank. So now they need to find a way to pull the moon back into its original orbit and also have enough fuel to get back home. Remember when I said that Whatever Happened to SpongeBob was my least favorite special of the first 5 seasons? Well, Goons on the Moon is actually my least favorite special of the entire show. Yes, worse than SpongeBob You're Fired and A SquarePants Family Vacation. At least with the former, I got some positivity out of it, with the second half of that episode being the highlight. And for as much as I didn't get much out of the latter, I would have sooner taken it over this nonsensical mess. First off, this episode feels like a ripoff of Mooncation. An episode I didn't really care about at first, but after seeing what it could have been, yeah, I think I'd take that episode any day of the week. This episode just sets up it's just going to be a normal trip to the moon, and maybe it wouldn't seem too bad, but honestly the first half was a little bit boring to me. Very few of the jokes in this episode landed for me, with the exception of that one fourth wall joke.
Meet
Not to mention this episode introduced a new character, Squidina, who was honestly a pretty annoying addition, as her and Pearl bickering with each other was not funny. Aren't you glad they made this character a mainstay in the Patrick Star Show? But then you get to the second half of the episode and it completely loses me. Just like in Mooncation, SpongeBob accidentally depletes the fuel source. But whereas in that episode it happened from a complete accident from having fun, here it was because of some dumb decision Sandy made when designing the rocket. Putting the launch bucket close to the lunch button. Really? But that's not even the worst part. SpongeBob throws an anchor down and it gets caught in the crater, and as the rocket is flying out, at normal speed for a rocket launch, might I add, it pulls the moon out of orbit? I'm sorry, I'm calling bullshit on that. Scrat playing pool with the planets on a flying saucer was more believable. Not to mention this whole situation adds stakes right the hell out of nowhere. At least with Mooncation, the only real stakes was trying to get home as fast as possible. Here, it's about saving Bikini Bottom by putting the moon back into orbit while still having enough fuel to get back home. And then out of nowhere, they come across Santa Claus, who apparently has been sleeping on the moon. Oh, wait, I see what's going on here. They only introduced Santa in this episode so Nickelodeon could market this as a Christmas special, even though the rest of this episode has literally nothing to do with Christmas. I mean, at least Louis Black does a solid performance as Santa Claus.
The dark side of the moon is the only place dark enough for me to get any sleep. I was sleeping like a baby. Visions of sugar plums.
And I guess that whole Christmas spoiler joke was mildly amusing. But calling this a Christmas special is about as believable as calling Die Hard a Christmas movie. Yeah, I know it takes place during Christmas Eve and has some relevance. Shut up. But overall, I just can't stand this episode. It retreads the plot of another episode and does it worse. A majority of the jokes in this episode didn't really get much out of me, and the Christmas elements only exist just for false advertisement. And I have no troubles calling it my least favorite half-hour special in the show.
Oh. Oh ho ho backwards.
Ink Lemonade. In this episode, Patrick opens up a lemonade stand, but he has almost none of the proper ingredients to make such. However, after being startled, Squidward ends up squirting his ink into the glass pitcher, and Patrick starts to sell his ink as black lemonade, which becomes a hit with the customers not realizing what it is they're drinking. So for the rest of the episode, Patrick attempts to scare the ink out of Squidward.
Oh my god,
Wow.
who could have seen this coming? Oh,
Burned majorly on
wow,
some
what a
stages, but
surprise.
never quite
I am
that
so
bad.
sorry.
Yeah, I think you all knew coming in this was going to be on this list. And there's a good reason for that. This episode's bullshit. Right from the get-go, I knew I was in for a horrible ride, as it feels like Patrick's intelligence is at its lowest point. Actually, scratch that. It might even be lower than that. I seriously felt like I was losing brain cells from the first few minutes of the episode. But that's not the only issue with this episode. Another issue is that it's a Squidward torture episode. Oh my god, what is this show's recent obsession with picking on Squidward? Yes, he could be arrogant, but most of the time he's just going about his day. And on top of that, it's a gross out episode. I mean, SpongeBob and Patrick are literally serving customers Squidward's ink, which just so happens to come out of Squidward's nose. But if that's not enough to really gross you out, there's also moments like this.
I said I will not.
May I borrow a cup of squid squeezing?
I thought we've gone past these moments of unfiltered, over-the-top gross out, but apparently I was wrong. Add this to the list of episodes that legitimately made me sick. So essentially, this episode combines all the worst assets from the dark era of the show and puts it into one episode. Why? Why would anyone want to watch that kind of episode? But the most shocking thing about this episode, it's not even the worst in any of those categories. Or, well, 2 out of the 3 categories. I may take episodes like Waiting or Goons on the Moon over this, but I'd also take this over episodes like The Splinter and Choir Boys. And there are a few reasons for that. First off, while it is disgusting and a bit anger-inducing, It's not as graphic or as fetish-ridden as The Splinter, nor is it as unfunny and painful as Choir Boys. I can at least say I liked some aspects of this episode. Like, there were some jokes that legitimately got a laugh or a grin out of me.
Oh, I ran out of lemons, so I'm squeezing this.
That won't work!
Could use more fire hose.
Plus, I do really like the atmosphere with Patrick's fake wasteland. Like, it made me almost forget for a second that he was harassing Squidward with all this. Almost. But aside from that, yeah, I can definitely see why this episode has gotten so much hate from fans. And the fact that I came across 2 episodes I felt were worse than this should probably tell you what to come for the rest of the list. But even looking past that, the episode is still a mess.
I'm a haunted tablecloth!
Call the cops. After another failed attempt to steal the formula, Plankton is finally sentenced to prison. However, the authorities also take the formula as evidence. This is a problem because without it, Mr. Krabs and Spongebob cannot make any more Krabby Patties. So they have to impersonate as police officers to infiltrate the police station and retrieve the formula. Meanwhile, Plankton works with Patrick to get out of the cell so he could steal the formula behind their backs. This is one of those instances where if you think about it for more than 2 seconds, you realize this episode is doomed from the start. So the whole driving factor of the episode is that the police officers are taking the formula as evidence. And without it, Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob can't make Krabby Patties. Which was proven in the episode The Great Patty Caper. But wait, don't you have Krabby Patties still in the freezer? Like, the episode doesn't acknowledge this. But no, if that was the case, we wouldn't have an episode. But you know what's funny? How the second movie at least had the decency to acknowledge they were out of Krabby Patties at that moment. Here, if there was a chance that they still had Krabby Patties, they could wait until the authorities return the formula, and boom! Problem solved. But no, Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob are too impatient, and they decide to retrieve the formula themselves. Now, in their defense, you could say that, well, they're trying to prevent Plankton from stealing the formula at the police station. But by that logic, it makes the police force look even worse. Because they're literally just gift-wrapping the opportunity for Plankton to steal the formula again. And guess what? That is precisely what Plankton tries to do. It doesn't matter which way you look at it, concept-wise, the episode doesn't work. But is the episode at least better in execution? Not really. Once again, they play the whole trope of making the cops look like unreasonable idiots. It might actually be the worst I've seen of them in the entire show. Also, you gotta love how they put Patrick in prison just because they can. And oh my god, he is just unbearable. While he's not acting dickish like in episodes such as Stuck in the Ringer or Yours, Mine, and Mine, he's still just frustrating and adds nothing to this episode.
Where's my ice cream? Where's my ice cream? Where? Oh, there it is.
What are you doing, you maniac?
And while on the topic of the humor, it's not that good. Aside from those 2 things I just mentioned, the rest of the jokes in this episode range from things like, look, SpongeBob's arresting a little girl who's selling cookies, but she turns out to be a convicted criminal. It's so funny. And look, Patrick thinks that Mr. Krabs' eyes are actually ice cream cones. It's so hilarious. There's so much my suspension of disbelief can take. Overall, this episode was just a complete mess. It's pretty much the same problem as doing Times, and you know how much I love that episode. And the most surprising part of all, this isn't even the worst episode of the season. Like, what could possibly be worse than the retread of an episode I already hated? Well...
Oh, but officer, I have more confessions.
Zip it, kid. I get it, you're a criminal mastermind.
Guilty! Yay!
Squirrel jelly. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick are trying to have fun with different activities, but Sandy starts to act way too competitive with them. They decide to go jellyfishing, but when Sandy starts to get involved, She ends up getting way too aggressive as she starts holding the jellyfish she caught captive. But in her attempts to make this activity even more engaging, she feeds them some sort of power-boosting fish food, turning them into rampaging buzzsaws, disrupting the peaceful boundaries of jellyfish fields. And after witnessing the amount of chaos she's caused, she decides to change her ways and be more serene. However, the jellyfish start to band together to form a bloodthirsty monster. It's up to her to stop it before it can rampage throughout Bikini Bottom. I apologize in advance. The rant you're about to see will not be pretty, and if you have young children, this would be a good time for them to leave the room. You still here? Okay. This episode might actually be worse than Choir Boys. What? Where do I even begin with this episode? Well, I mentioned in my updated pre-movie review that I don't like seeing Sandy's reckless or aggressive side for no reason other than just for laughs. I even teased that this episode was a prime example of that. Because not only is she incredibly aggressive with everybody, but she has zero regards for their health and safety. Gee, why does that sound familiar? It's even worse when she eventually goes jellyfishing with SpongeBob and Patrick. Like, they started doing this to get away from Sandy, and they had every right to do so. And unsurprisingly, they were proven right because Sandy gets way too aggressive with catching the jellyfish, going even as far as to hold them captive.
I'm catching and releasing them from their freedom.
As well as poisoning them and effectively destroying their ecosystem. And the worst part, she gets away with all of it. No serious punishment, no heavy scolding, no changing for the better, nothing. Okay, she took a bit of responsibility for her actions, but it was more like, tee, I guess I got a bit too aggressive there. You almost died, but lols. And sure, you could argue that she was trying to become a better person after this incident, but then at the end, the episode's like, nah, screw that, let's just revert her back to her normal self again. Because instead of some actual character development, let's get a little ha-ha joke at the end. Speaking of which, the jokes, oh my god, the jokes. Okay, look, Choir Boys had a lot of really bad jokes in that episode that either dragged out for so long, or focused heavily on seeing the characters get unnecessarily tortured. Well, this episode decides to take both those kind of jokes and turn it to 13. Like, look at Sandy just destroying her opponents. And SpongeBob and Patrick. Isn't that so funny? Aren't you laughing so fucking hard right now? I know it feels like I'm harping a bit on Sandy's portrayal in this episode, but this really is the catalyst to why this episode is such a disaster. She acts like a fucking psychopath in this episode and gets no punishment for it. And everything else about the episode is either boring or even brain dead. And to make matters worse, the thing that puts it above Choir Boys, at least that episode was its usual 11 minutes. Kind of feels like longer considering how much they drag out their moments, but it was intended to be an 11-minute episode. This episode, however, decides to take the Shanghai approach, clocking in at 16 minutes. But why? Why would you give this disaster of an episode an extended runtime? I would have sooner taken a 5-minute increase on literally any other episode from this season. And yes, I am including Ink Lemonade. I guess they tried to use the extended runtime for the big jellyfish battle, but honestly, I just couldn't care at this point. Especially since the episode just reverts back to the status quo. So, yeah. This episode was an absolute dumpster fire. It's so awful that it was one of the first episodes I can recall where I contemplated leaving the show. The only reason I didn't was because the show was entering its 20th anniversary, so I was curious to see how they would handle it. And in all honesty, I'm kind of glad I stayed, because I probably wouldn't be here reviewing episodes if it weren't for that. But regardless, I still have no troubles calling Squirrel Jelly my least favorite episode of season 11. The characters range from dumb to hateable. The jokes are unfunny and dragged out. The pacing feels incredibly slow with its jokes and torture. And the fact that this episode is 16 minutes just makes it all even worse. I guess you might like it if you're into this kind of humor, and maybe you might find some of the action pieces kind of enjoyable, but overall, I get nothing out of this.
Whammer, bammer, and the slammer! Woohoo! I'm the queen of jellyfish field! How does that feel, losers?
So those were my least favorite episodes of season 11. I think I need to go take a breather for a moment. I'll see you all in my next video.
Wait, hold on. Aren't you forgetting something?
I beg your pardon? Oh shoot, that's right, I forgot the best list. Here's the top 5 best and worst episodes of season 11.
Wait! We already put up the end tag! Do you know how long that takes to set up?
You guys got the clips?
Cut!
Doodle Dimensions. In this episode, Sandy builds a dimensional portal to grab some nuts, but SpongeBob and Patrick mess with the machine and end up in a blank dimension. There, they find out they have the ability to draw things to life. Patrick then inadvertently draws Doodle Bob, and it proceeds to exact its revenge on SpongeBob and Patrick for what they did to him. This episode is a good example of calling back to a previous one. As a follow-up to Frankendoodle, it's pretty much on par with that episode. I like the idea behind this world of where anything SpongeBob and Patrick draw comes to life. Now, yeah, they did the same thing in Bikini Bottom, but here it's a lot more creative.
Oh, my house! Hey!
Oops, forgot to draw the ground.
I'll admit, the first few minutes of the episode were kind of groan-inducing, with SpongeBob and Patrick being frustratingly idiotic.
Oh, so swirly.
Look at all the colors.
Whatever you do, don't walk into it.
Can we skip into it?
But once we enter the titular Doodle Dimension, the episode starts to pick up with some creative, hilarious, and even engaging moments. Like I said in my updated pre-movie video, I wanted to see them expand on the idea of bringing drawings to life. And this episode does a pretty decent job with that, with some unique locations, the different characters they draw, and the many different ways SpongeBob and Doodle Bob combat each other. I found myself really enjoying this episode, and it took me back to when I was watching Frankendoodle or playing Drawn to Life SpongeBob Edition. And I was kind of surprised to find that there were people who don't like this episode. Hell, there were some who made it out to be one of the worst episodes of the entire show. But come on, it's not that bad. I mean, have you seen Squirrel Jelly and Choir Boys? All in all, I really like this episode. And maybe I could see more episodes like this in seasons 12 or 13. At least I would hope. Mustard O' Mines. After running out of mustard, Mr. Krabs orders SpongeBob, Squidward, as well as Patrick to go down the mines to collect some more mustard. However, an old geezer warns them the mines are cursed, but no one really listens. As they go further down the mines, they eventually reach their destination and start searching for mustard. They find the source, but the old geezer has followed them and warns them again, saying he was discouraging them from mining the mustard to avoid it exploding under tremendous pressure. Concept-wise, I think this episode stands out. The idea of condiments being like these precious materials that people mine, that idea does have merit. And thankfully, the episode manages to be really enjoyable. The journey SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick go on to get to the condiment mines is really fun, supplying plenty of funny jokes and gags throughout the episode, like some of the scenes with the old geezer.
You got out in your life.
But am I?
Yeah, you're standing right there.
But am I?
Yeah, you're right.
I see your foot.
No, you don't.
His foot's gone.
Or the different ways SpongeBob and his friends explore the mines.
Hey, I found something yellow. Never mind, it's just gold.
All I'm getting is dumb old diamonds.
Gold and diamonds. Gold dust. No, it's just sand.
Maybe they're not all winners, but it's mostly consistent. It never feels too overbearing or over the top, unlike with Call the Cops or Goons on the Moon. It's just letting us vibe with its unique idea. And I like it when episodes do that, like with Bro Friends. Overall, I really enjoyed this episode. It has a unique concept and does justice with it.
He's coming round.
Wait. I need...
What can I get for you?
I need a little mustard for the Krabby Patty.
Why do I even bother?
The Legend of Bikini Bottom. In this half-hour Halloween special, SpongeBob is anxious about the horror season. But Patrick reassures him that Halloween doesn't have to be as horrifying as it would seem, with the mantra of scary equals funny. This works as SpongeBob starts to have a more fun time, but the Flying Dutchman overhears the laughter and is baffled at the idea of finding scary funny. So he attempts to scare him so hard to persuade his new approach. When that doesn't work, he takes desperate measures of capturing his friends. Okay, I want to get my one nitpick with this episode out of the way because it has been eating on me since its premiere. Why was this episode made a stop-motion special? Don't get me wrong, it's nice to see them go back to this art style, and it still looks as impressive as it did the first time. It's just that it feels like it's trying to piggyback off of It's a SpongeBob Christmas. With that episode, it made sense because it was trying to replicate those classic Christmas specials like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and A Year Without a Santa Claus. Whereas here, it feels like they're only doing it because, well, it was popular back then, so why not do it again? You can probably bring up it's trying to replicate The Nightmare Before Christmas. But that movie was technically also a Christmas movie, so I don't know, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But other than that, this is still a really great episode. I like the plot of this episode with Patrick trying to help SpongeBob warm up more to the horror season, and I think kids would learn plenty from it. Plus, we got the return of the Flying Dutchman after his 6-year absence. I was really looking forward to that episode just for that alone, and thankfully he hasn't lost his step yet.
What do you want?
Scare and release! I love this job.
And yeah, while I did criticize the decision to make this a stop-motion special, at least they still remember how they made it work. The atmosphere is really well done. And they even throw in some puppetry during the song of the episode. Which, by the way, that song absolutely slaps.
When you hear the lonesome ring of chimes that bring the spirits singing, soon your spine is tingling and there's just one thing to say. Eyeballs are calculating, now your heart is palpitating, and there's only just one thought that you can convey.
And even the comedy is also really good. Once again, the Flying Dutchman still manages to be really enjoyable after 6 years. And even Patrick manages to throw in some funny moments as well.
The only thing you have to fear is... yourself! Oh! Stop staring at me like that! No! See?
I also really like some of the minor details, like Mr. Krabs and Plankton turning their restaurants into their rivals. It's just that great attention to detail. The Legend of Bikini Bottom is an absolutely fantastic episode. In fact, I think I actually like this episode more than Scaredy Pants. The atmosphere is really well done, the jokes are really funny, the characters are really enjoyable, and the morals make this a good episode you would want to show to your kids. Just like with It's a SpongeBob Christmas, this feels like it belongs in the first 5 seasons. Heck, maybe even the first 3. And for a modern episode, that's no small feat.
Yep, I got the same answer. Scary equals...
This episode centers around Fred, who's best known for getting his leg injured. He receives his final warning, and if he comes back with an injured leg, the doctor will replace it with a mechanical robotic leg from another robot. SpongeBob tries to make sure to keep Fred and his leg safe from harm, but he soon reveals he does this so he gets to see his nurse whom he has a crush on. So now they try to find a way to get his leg injured so he can get back to the hospital. I was not expecting to like this episode as much as I did. This is one of those episodes that so could have easily been botched. I mean, an episode based on the recurring gag of the guy yelling, "My leg!" It would have been really annoying to hear him say that verbatim. But thankfully, the episode is anything but irritating. What really makes this one of the standout episodes of the season is the variety of ways they play on this one gag. From the different ways that Fred and even some other fish get injured. and the different ways SpongeBob tries to prevent Fred's leg from getting injured. Plus, we get a bit of an explanation as to why Fred likes getting his leg injured. And it's kind of charming if you ask me. You even get a little decent song to go with it.
My leg is in love, hey, my leg is in love. Like an old snug shoe that fits like a glove. My leg is in love, wow, my leg is in love. Through my femur to the marrow is where Cupid shot an arrow. This is another case of an episode that calls back on an aspect of the show and does it really well. Heck, maybe it might be the best of them. And the fact that this episode is based off of the "my leg" gag, it's even more impressive. Good job, guys. I want to see more episodes like this. Hey, everybody, look who's back! My leg! Plankton paranoia. In this episode, Mr. Krabs is preparing everyone for Plankton to ambush the Krusty Krab and steal the formula. However, after a few hours, he's yet to infiltrate the Krusty Krab, which sends Mr. Krabs into spiraling anxiety as he assumes everyone else is in cahoots with Plankton, even going as far as to accuse SpongeBob and Squidward of working against Mr. Krabs. It gets so out of hand he barricades himself and the formula in the Krusty Krab as his paranoia starts to get more out of hand. It was kind of a bit hard to put into words on why I like this episode so much, but to put it simply, this episode is one course meal done right. The surrealism in the portrayal of Mr. Krabs' anxiety is what really got me into this episode. Instead of treating it like a ha-ha funny moment, the episode treats it like a serious problem as Mr. Krabs loses more of his sanity. Sure, they do still throw in some humorous moments with it, but it's less ha-ha look he's scared, and more oh my god I think he's gone nuts. Whoa, hey, slow down there, Grandpa. Let's just see here. Aha! Another one of Plankton's spies. I just wanted some for later. You're banned! I also really love how they animate Mr. Krabs in this episode, really getting across Krabs' growing anxiety. In a way, it feels like it's turning into one of those horror parodies, topped off with that whole psychedelic nightmare vision scene. This honestly feels like one of the darkest episodes the show has concocted in a while, probably since the Nasty Patty back in 2002. And that's what I feel the big appeal of this episode is, from the surreal atmosphere to some of the funny moments that don't feel tasteless. It all culminates into what is my favorite episode of season 11. Eat your fucking heart out one-course meal.
Maybe we should postpone our plans for tonight.
Plans? You're both working for Plankton! Get out of me restaurant, you tricky, treacherous traitors!
And those were my favorite episodes of season 11. Man, that felt like a roller coaster. That just leaves us with season 12 and 13. Now, I haven't watched every episode from either of those seasons, but with season 12 being on DVD and Paramount Plus, I do have the time to catch up with that season. But at the time of recording this, season 13 is still not on Paramount Plus, and I'm a little hesitant on getting the DVD. But I already have the subscription, so I might as well wait until it's on there. But anyways, what are your favorites and least favorites of season 11? Be sure to let me know in the comment section down below. Also, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified when my next video is coming out. And until next time, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.